Our last speaker of the day is the founding executive editor of Wired magazine, former publisher and editor of the Whole Earth Review, co-founder of the ongoing Hackers Conference, a conservationist, a student of Asian and digital cultures. His newest book, which you have, What Technology Wants, has already been called a tour de force. Here he is. Please welcome Kevin Kelly.
Good evening. You know, technology is probably the most powerful force on this planet. That's the conclusion of this book, What Technology Wants. And what it wants is actually to increase the options and opportunities for everybody here. That's why there are these millions of people migrating into the city. As Richard Florida notes, half the world's population is now urban. That's why we are making these things. Houston is a center of technological innovation and creation. And it's important to remember that while we are making these gadgets and things and internet sites and yet another thing for the car or yet another kind of car, we're not really just making these objects. We're actually doing something bigger. We are creating opportunities and options for everybody to allow the possibility for every person on this planet to share their genius. And that is the message that technology is bringing to us. But people say, okay, well, that's really nice, Mr. Wired magazine, but what's next? And so I think we want to know what's next, what's tomorrow, what are we going to do on Monday? And so I wanted to take a little time to talk about what's coming, and my expertise is sort of where I've been hanging out for the last 20 years is the internet, online. And I'll try and suggest some things where I think things are going online. And I have basically 4 points I want to make, 4 things I want to talk about. So the first thing is that our culture is sort of built around the book. It's built around documents and, you know, things like the Constitution, things like the Bible, things like laws and others, codes that have to be written down. So we became a people of the book, and our culture really revolved around the book, but we are quickly becoming people of the screen. Little screens, big screens, and screens that are coming all sizes, and they're everywhere. In case you haven't noticed, this is sort of the ideal, this is what I want for my office. I want screens on the walls, and we have screens that fill up buildings, and of course we have screens, all tiny, little tiny things, all different sizes, and we have different reactions and different kind of modes that we engage with these. We kind of lean back for the 10-foot away big screens or the huge screens, and then we kind of lean forward into the little things. And so the real question is kind of what's going to dominate, and how close are we going to make these things to us, and kind of as we caress them in some ways, maybe we even wear them to some extent. But the point is that these screens are going to become ubiquitous. They'll be everywhere. Every flat surface will basically have them. And as they fill our lives, we're kind of in a progression from an ancient, thousands of years ago's culture that was oral, an orality, where poetry and recitation and rhetoric were prized as the center. And then, of course, we had the Gutenberg shift, where literacy became the dominant form and the center of communication, and that was what really counted. We're now in the second Gutenberg shift to kind of like a blurring of, I don't know what you want to call it, intermedia, the media of all medias, the transmedia, some large thing where everything is coming through these screens. It's really hard to tell if you see a screen what's playing on it. Is it a game, a movie, a book? What everything is kind of on this one thing. And so it's important to remember that even today already, some of these Kindle books are outselling hardcover books. And so what has been forecast for 20 years is finally coming true, which is paper is going to go away. That kind of inevitable progression is really happening again and again in technologies, and we can either kind of deny them or accept them and work with them. We want to listen to the technology and hear what it says, and what it's saying is that it's all going to be bits and digits. So in this new world, gestures. Why do we have to use our little fingertips? We can gesture like the Tom Cruise character in Minority Report, or in the other movies, where you're interacting with these things with your whole body, or even your voice. That's the next thing. And if you've seen kids with iPads, oh my gosh, they take to it just like ducks to water. In fact, someone was describing an episode where they left a color photograph on a table in a household where there was an iPad, and the little girl who was a toddler came over and she was trying to expand saying, "It's broken." It's not working. Well, yes, someday it will. And at the same time, all these things we have embedded in them cameras, basically, and these things are all watching everything, and they're also, of course, watching us. And so there's no reason why these devices and things that we have can't track our eyes to see where we're paying attention. There's software that does this already, and this is kind of a map, a heat map, they call it, of a website, and showing you where there's the most tension over an aggregate of people watching it, and where their eyes are going. And we can do that so we can actually have things that adapt to what we look at. So you can imagine a book that's sort of watching you read it, and it's changing depending on how you're reading it. So there is a sense, again, which is just a much more interactive dimension, where these screens, of course, are two-way screens in some senses. There's voice. We can talk to them. They listen to us. They respond back. What you saw David Pogue talking about, it can hear us. And so it's kind of a two-way mirror, two-way window, I should say, where we're both looking into this thing, and it's sort of seeing us back, and so there's this kind of interactive dimension to it. So that's where it's going in one dimension, to this kind of trans-screen world, where there are screens everywhere. We become people of the screen. And that changes a lot of things, because you might remember that the word author is the same root as authority. And when you don't have authors, and screens don't suggest authors, they suggest a kind of a liquid assembly, a transient stream of things, which I'll get to later, that changes our idea of authority. So the second thing is the fact that these screens and everything else that we're putting together, that we're making and connecting, in some senses form a single hyper super something. And we call that, right now, we call that the cloud. It's there. And we tend to think that the cloud is sort of out there, but we have to remember that we are actually part of the cloud. That the 2 billion people who are online right now, or the 4 billion people who have cell phones, that we ourselves are part of this cloud. So it's not really out there. We're sort of in it. And the major verb that's happening here is sharing. So everybody's sharing. You share to get on the cloud. You share with the cloud. You share within the cloud. And so that's sort of this new verb that society has always had been about sharing, but we're sharing at scales that were not possible before. The earlier speaker talking about the CAPTCHAs and being able to do things with 1 million people or 750 million people. That's what's different, is the scale and dimensions of sharing. And by the way, people talk about, well, sharing, yeah, they'll share this, but they're not going to share financial information. They're not going to share health information. They're not going to share personal genetic information. Wrong. We're sharing everything. These are just some sites where people are sharing things already. So in a certain sense, we're seeing this kind of a little bit of a shift from the sense of ownership to access. So why own music when you can just have access to it? And in fact, it's very hard to own an idea. Who owns an idea? I mean, the idea doesn't really make it's not any value unless it's shared, and who owns it? So this realm, this shift is very important, and it's going to spill over to other things. It'll start off just with digital things, which we may not own, but just have access to. But it can shift to even the hardware things. These are just some other websites that right now that you don't really buy things like on Netflix. We've given up in our family purchasing any kind of movies at all. We're just subscribing to this stuff. This flows through. So we pay for access rather than to own things. And I did a calculation to figure out that all the music, all the recorded music in the world that exists, that we know about, would fit on one 6 terabyte hard disk, which is about less than $600 from Amazon. So you can fit the entire jukebox, celestial jukebox of all the music in the world on one disc today. And tomorrow it'll be this big, and then next year it'll fit into your pants pocket. And if you have all that in one thing, why even carry it around? We might as well just subscribe to it. And so that's where we're going. And at the same time, that stuff that's being produced by others is just a small part of all the stuff that's being produced overall, because most of the stuff being produced is being produced by the people consuming it. That's that prosumer revolution where you are generating the content. YouTube, okay? Wikipedia, all these things. You are generating the content. You are servicing it, so the help desk kind of goes away, and people have these forums, help forums, where the other users answer the questions and serve the new users. And viral marketing is the same kind of idea. Why hire a marketing department when you can have the users market things? And then finally, as we've seen, there's even an effort to go to having, like in Kiva and other kinds of things, having the users finance Kickstart and other things where they're actually financing the things that we curate. So there is this shift down to the bottom. And we're trying to think about what cannot be improved by having you do it. Some people try to make a cola, open source cola, in the same kind of way. But I think in terms of the sharing dial, we're still at the very beginning. We haven't really seen how far. I don't believe it can go all the way. I don't think that everything, we can't make lots of things we cannot make just by sharing. It requires a little bit more kind of an individual strong voice. But we also don't know how far sharing can go. And I think we've just begun to see what can be done just using the bottom connected together. So that's the second one. There's a sharing default. The third one has to do with the fact that the internet, as we know it, is basically the world's largest copy machine. Anything that can be copied, if you put it on or near the internet, it's going to be copied indiscriminately forever. It's like a superconducted liquid. It'll just go throughout and be copied. In fact, when you send an email message to someone else, it's being copied multiple times in interval. It's just the nature of the internet. So what that means is that copies of things are not worth very much because they're just indiscriminately replicated. So the only things that really become valuable on the internet are things that can't be copied. What can't be copied? Well, actually, there was something like immediacy. So just the other day, I wanted to actually find an early National Geographic pre-copyrighted story, and I found this site that offers it. So you can't really see it, but what's interesting is, like, if I wanted to download it, and I didn't mind how long it took, like an hour, it was free. But if I wanted to download it at a higher speed, like within a couple of minutes, you had to pay. So you're paying for immediacy. That was something that can't be copied very well. The copy was free, but the immediacy you paid for. So there's other things like personalization. Music is free, but if you want to personalize or customize to the acoustics of your living room, you'll pay. Authenticity, yeah, the software is free, but if you actually want to have the authentic version of it from Microsoft, you'll pay. Patronage, yeah, you can have a copy of it, but if you haven't wanted the signed version from the creator to make that connection with somebody who's made it, you'll pay. Interpretation, yeah, software is free, but the manual is $1,000 if you really want to understand how it's used. All these things are all different generatives, and they're liquid in the sense that they can't be copied. They have to be generated in flow from the source. So these generatives are what propels this new economy. And for those who are in the business of it, there's kind of a concern right now of what the model is. And I'm saying don't worry about the model, because wherever attention flows, money will follow. And I've seen this, and we've mapped this out through taking up the total number of hours devoted to different media. We can show how over time, over decades, where the total attention, a number of hours flows in newspapers, TVs, whatever it is, that the total revenue for that industry will follow. That's just certain. So we may not know how this is going to happen on these screens, but that's where people are paying attention. That's where the money will happen. So that's the third one, generative value. The last point is that it's not pages anymore. It's streams. It's flows. That's what the Twitters and the Facebooks and the YouTubes and the Netflix are all about. These things are flowing. And so original computers were kind of files and folders and desktops, the old kind of paper metaphor. And then we moved a little bit to the web with paper and links and stuff. Now we're at the streams and the tags and the clouds, and it's this kind of a much more liquid vision. Chris Anderson at Wired, my colleague, did a chart showing that the total volume of bandwidth, that the total percentage that were spent on web pages is decreasing because everything is going to flows and video and things like that. So the web page, as a relative percentage of the total flows of data, is becoming less and less. So we have this switch from pages and the PC and today and me and items to these new metaphors, which is streams and the cloud and now and we, the sharing and data. And so everything's in real time, and you have your different streams and they kind of intersect. And this is sort of the emerging new metaphor away from pages that we're seeing. And oh, by the way, if you have these kind of real time streams, then you can actually start to anticipate, if you have enough data, which is what Google's doing, anticipate what you're going to do. So they actually can give you your web results before you finish typing the words in Google. So they're anticipating what you're going to say and giving you the results. So we have a database of things. Everything that we make is going to be in the Internet of Things, not just the airline, but your seat in the airline is connected in some ways, flowing the data into this thing. Every location has it. Everything that we make, all parts of our body and medical records, all this stuff is flowing into this worldwide database, this Web 3.0, whatever you want to call it. We don't have a good name for it, this cloud of stuff. It's always on, and it's everywhere. Okay? So you have to remember, it's always on, it's everywhere. We will become incredibly dependent upon it. Okay? It will feel amputated when we're not on. So that's the real-time data flows. That's the fourth thing. And I think these things of screens and sharing and the generative nature, not copies, and the data flows real-time, that's sort of that's where we're headed for. It's this kind of world of screens everywhere. And the point I want to make about that is that when we thought about the web originally, we thought that originally the web was going to make TV only better, but it didn't turn out to be that. It was something completely different. And I think as we look into the future, we think that, okay, it's still going to be the web only better, but it's not going to be just the web and better. The web has roughly been around 7,000 days, and all the things that you have seen that has done, all this stuff, the stock quotes and the real estate prices and the maps and the encyclopedias, I mean, this whole cornucopia of stuff is here. And not only is it here, but it's free. And if 7,000 days ago, say 1985 or something, you had told someone that this is what was coming, they would tell you it's impossible. There's no economic model to explain how we went from there to here. How could all this happen and have everybody have it mostly for free? It's simply impossible. In the Wikipedia, it's impossible. It's impossible in theory. There's no theory to explain why everybody would write this encyclopedia that would be in any way believable. So Wikipedia shows that basically we have to get better at believing the impossible. Okay? So that's the first lesson I think that we're going to take away, is that what's coming may seem impossible, but we have so many examples of how the impossible has happened in our own lives. And the long-term thing means that we're not late. That what we're bringing forward is increasing choices and options for everybody. Is that we're going to reach 4 billion people. We're going to have internet. Everyone's going to be connected. That we can actually reach people that have not been connected before into this large cloud, whatever we want to call it, and that they have the chance of finding a technology that will unleash their genius. So imagine the loss to the world if Beethoven had been born before the invention of the technologies of the symphony or the piano, what a huge loss that would have been. Or if Alfred Hitchcock had been born before we had invented the technologies of cinema, what a loss that would have been. But so today, somewhere in the world, there is a genius. There are many geniuses who are born, whose technologies we have not yet made for them. And so we have a moral obligation, I believe, to create new technologies to bring to them, including the old technologies of clean water and education, to liberate their genius and their full expression. And that's sort of what technology wants. The next 7,000 days are going to be more change than the last 7,000 days. And you are not too late to participate. So thank you for your time and your attention.
Kevin, thank you. I have a
Sure.
10,000-day question for you.
Yes.
So 10 years ago, we were all paying X cents per minute for long distance, and essentially long distance is non-existent.
Right.
Will the internet exist in 10 years?
Yes. The internet as this communication web that is connecting everybody to everybody else and everything to everything else will definitely exist. Whether it is based on the particular codes that we have right now, that's uncertain, but most probably it will. Whether it is based and run primarily by the U.S., that's uncertain. But I think the internet itself was inevitable, but the expression of that is not necessarily inevitable. So I don't see any force that would sort of derail the internet, and which, by the way, is the most reliable machine we have ever made. There's no other mechanical or invention that we have ever made that has run uninterrupted for as long as the internet had without totally stopping. So, I mean, jet engines or other things don't even approach the number of hours that the internet has been up without totally crashing. So it's the most reliable machine we have, and I think it will certainly be 10 years. Whether it would be 1,000 years, I don't know.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Great.